Hey, what's up? Shout out to TriFan. What's up, TriFan? Hey, look, I've found a new mascot. It is the. Nobody gets madder than the Sony people. It's the poo-flinging Sony monkey. They love to throw their own poo. Wah! Chill out, okay? Have a sense of humor, for God's sakes. Equivalency. Now, I did some testing because people were having a hissy fit. And, that's not true. I was like, yeah, it is true. No, it's not. Yeah, it is. Here we have this honking piece of beautiful glass that you would want to have sex with. It's the 85mm f1.4 D-series autofocus Nikkor. A very expensive lens, and oh my god, look at the glass on that sucker. And here we have the Fuji 56mm f1.2. Now, if you'll notice something here, this is an f1.4, and this is an f1.2. Front element looks a lot bigger here than it does here. Yeah, well, this is a DX crop sensor lens. This is a full frame lens, okay? Now, obviously, I can mount this on the Fuji, which is what these test shots were done. I was comparing an Nikon D750, exact same distance, nothing changed other than the lens and the aperture, and obviously the camera. It is the case, and this is irrefutable, okay? Kind of, if you say goofy things, you remember them, they kind of like become brain bugs, so that's kind of the reason why I say things in a goofy manner, is because they stick in people's heads. When you say something really analytical, people kind of tend to forget it. And here's the goofy thing. Every lens on Earth, doesn't matter who made it, they all crap out the exact same light. They don't know, they don't care what camera they're sitting on, they don't care what size the sensor is underneath it. So when I mount this lens on using an adapter, for example, on a Fuji, okay, well, you have to apply the crop factor. That's fine. You are looking at a crop. You are not looking at magnification. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. So, what are we seeing? Are we seeing a magnified image, or are we just seeing crop of a lens? Is it the lens still a true 85mm on both? Right now, we're actually looking at the same lens. This is on the Fuji X-T1. Here we have f1.2 with a 56mm. Here we have f1.4. Actual distance to the Christmas tree lights, or as the Australians call them, fairy lights. You never get away with saying that in the United States. You see an Australian at Christmas time going, you have any fairy lights? And we'll look at you like, what the hell are you talking about? The distance was about 4.5, 5 feet. I had my monkey with the light stand sticking up its ass. F1.2, F1.4, really no difference. But that's not what I'm comparing. Not comparing the same lens here. And here we have F1.4, F2, and F2.8. F2.8 ain't looking so hot. Now, I did not set the color balance on this. This is not the point of the test. So I know the monkey looks like... By the way, the links are below. You can take a look. Let's go over here. It's a Nikon 85mm f1.4, at 1.4, f2, and f2.8. And I'll do a cross comparison. You can check it in the links below. Now, here is the closest, and it is like 98% the same as so far as the depth of field. And one thing you need to remember that, that depth of field is not the same thing as field of view. Depth of field is not the same thing as field of view. People say, well, what about the crop factor? Well, what about... It's different. Depth of field is not field of view. Now, the 56mm is roughly an 85mm lens on the Fuji that it was designed for. 56mm, okay, fine. That is the field of view. That is not the depth of field. A 56mm is a 56mm is a 56. An 85 is an 85 is an 85. So here I have the Fuji 56mm f1.2, and over here I have the Nikon D750 85mm at f2. So the bokeh, the out-of-focus elements, and the depth of field on these two are rendered almost dead. I mean, there's just like maybe 1% difference, but they're basically exactly the same. Same rendered on the 56mm at f1.2. Looks exactly the same, or basically 99% the same, at f2. on the D750 at 85 millimeter. Remember, the distance is exactly the same. I've got some more comparisons too. You can actually see the 85 millimeter on the Nikon at f1.4, f2, 2.8, and the same thing at 1.4, f2, and 2.8 on the Fuji, and you can compare the two. I went a little too far on that one. That's the guy from the camera store. He's funny. He is a really funny guy. I mean that in a good way. He's actually very funny. So of course there's how much the focus falls off, and then there's how it actually falls off. There are characteristics to each individual lens. Now a lot of people have said, well, you know, you can stick this 85 millimeter on your Fuji with an adapter and then back up. And it's like, yeah, well, that's going to change something. Now I've changed my subject to a camera distance. See, how far do you plan for me or someone else to back up in the studio? I mean, I'm like, beep, 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 let me back up and hit the wall. Let me open up the wall with a jackhammer. You know, so these are limitations of DX lenses. And like I said, field of view is totally different than depth of field. Something else you should also notice, and there's something that people don't really mention. Here I got the Fuji and the Fuji. And let me go to the Fuji versus the Nikon. I want you to take a look at the body, between the body and the face. You'll actually notice that since it's the same distance, here on the 85 millimeter and D750, here the 56 millimeter on the Fuji, ignore the aperture, because they're both different, obviously. You'll notice that the body and the face are slimmer on the full frame lens at 85, this is due to the focal, than it is on the 56. Now we know about lens compression. Like say you take a portrait shot at 300 millimeters and you're out in the field somewhere, you back up, you know, the sun's setting behind a gorgeous model, you back up 100 feet, what happens so far as lens compression? The moon obviously gets a lot bigger, the face changes, we know about lens compression. But what happens if you have the exact same distance, let's say studio setting? You got the exact same distance. I'm going to use the 85 millimeter of my full frame Nikon, or I'm going to use the equivalent. And it's equivalent, okay? It's not 85. 56 is still a 56, is still a 56. It doesn't matter if it's a DX lens or a full frame lens. You notice, and you'll have to take a look at the links below, how the face and the body looks fatter on this little fuzzy monkey on the Fuji than it does on the D750. Okay? When you keep the same distance between these two, why don't you answer me the question as to why the lens compression is inverse to what we normally conceive it of as, like if you have, you crop the shot of someone's face exactly the same size in post. If you go from, say, 24 millimeter up to 300 millimeter, a person's face goes like this, 24 millimeter, 40 millimeter, 50 millimeter, 60, 80, 100, 200, 300. Inverse. So can you explain that one? It's not really that difficult. Obviously, it is directly related to not the sensor, but to the focal length. See, the sensors don't play any part. You know, let's say if you got a window, which of course you do, you got a window in your house, and there's a lens on the front of that window, which of course no window has a lens on the front of it. You know, if you make the rear of that window that you're looking through larger or smaller, what the hell do you think has changed about the projection of the illumination through that window that has a lens or two or three or four lenses? Nothing has changed. Crop factor is crop factor is crop factor. Field of view is field of view is field of view. No lens knows or cares. It doesn't crap out any different light relative to the sensor that's underneath it. That doesn't change a damn thing. Well, sure it does. It changes the field of view. That's a crop. The quality, the nature of the light. You know, one of the top YouTube photographers on YouTube will tell you that the depth of field, and there's other people that have attacked his video on this because it's just flat out wrong. They'll say, well, the depth of field changes when you use a DX lens on a full frame camera, or vice versa. That's not that's just BS. That's not true at all. I mean, I know where you got this misinformation. But I mean, you have people believing that. People ask me that question all the well, so-and-so says in his YouTube channel that, the depth of field changes when you stick that lens on a crop sensor. No, it doesn't. The only thing that's changed is the angle of interception, the field of view. Nothing has changed. Well, the field of view has changed, but other than that, the nature of the bokeh, the depth of field, none of that has changed. The lenses don't know or care what size sensor is underneath them. They have no idea. None. So keeping the same distance, the wider lens will have a wider subject. In the case of when we're talking about the 56 millimeter versus the 85 millimeter, for example. Here's the case too. Since now that we know, as far as equivalency is concerned, we have to have this 56 millimeter at f1.2 to match the out-of-focus bokeh and rendition of the 85 millimeter at f2. So for the DX lens, you have to have a much faster lens, of course, which is more expensive to achieve. However, the lens elements only need to be smaller since they're covering a smaller circle of projection for the DX sensor. Nevertheless, they're still more expensive lenses to achieve the exact same depth of field. Not field of view, but the same depth of field. You know, which is rendering a cheaper lens at a higher f-stop. Cheaper lens. So if this lens were not a really expensive f1.4, which it is, if it were only an 85 millimeter f2, which is a damn cheap lens, by the way, then that means I could get away with using a cheap 80, which is an older 85 millimeter AIS lens, the 85 millimeter f2. I could use that and achieve the exact same results here with this at 85 millimeter shot at f2 as I can with this lens shot at f1.2. So, and that lens is $200. This lens is $1,000. So, the reality is, especially when it comes to Nikon, is that DX lenses are ultimately more expensive. Because to achieve the exact same rendition, the same depth of field, the same composition, and both of these are like 98-99% within each other. To achieve that, I have to buy this extremely expensive, very fast DX lens. Wow, that's an f1.2. Yeah, but this lens at f1.2 looks exactly the same as this lens at f2. And I don't need this expensive f1.4 if I'm going to shoot at f2, do I? All I need is an 85 millimeter f2, which is a damn cheap lens. Inexpensive, I should say. I have a couple of those lenses, by the way. Actually, like $180, I think. They're less than $200, so. Anyway, check the links below, and this is equivalency. Thanks. The poo-flinging Sony monkey says, "Whoop, whoop, 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 whoop." Yeah, I know, I'm crazy. Whatever. I made the point. Bye. Hasta la vista.